Helika Kaisel, the holiest place on planet Earth, Memela, the holiest place in the ganze Welt, to talk about the shilas of the Kaisel, the Chi of Kriya, what exactly is the Kedusha of the Kaisel, the various dinim of the Kaisel. But we have to get a little bit of a gefeel for the Helika Kaisel, the holiest place on earth. Suffice it to say, what it says in the Medrash. The Medrash tells us that the Olam Leizaza Shchina Misham. The Medrash says Hineu Oimid Achar Kaisleinu, that the Helika Bashefer stands behind the Kaisel. Hineu Oimid Achar Kaisleinu Umashkiach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has never Kivyachal the Shchina, whatever level of Shchina, but the level of Shchina has never left behind the Kaisel. It's no wonder how many people became Bali Tshuva by somebody tapping them on the shoulder at the Kaisel. They were tapped on the shoulder at the holiest place on planet Earth. They were on the holiest place in the ganze Welt. It's no wonder that being in such an environment generates a person's kedusha. It unleashes a person's pintel and neshama. So the holy Helika Kaisel, it requires us to darshan about the Kaisel, to discuss the Kaisel, to appreciate the Kaisel. It's a dua that once they came to the Sklen Rebbe, they told the Sklen Rebbe that the Satmar Rebbe holds you shouldn't go to the Kaisel. The Matonish gain to them Kaisel. So the Sklen Rebbe held, he said the same thing. He said, I also hold you shouldn't go to the Kaisel. Okay, the Satmar Rebbe's cheshbainis were based on different political cheshbainis, versteht sich mit the Tzionim and this. But the Sklen Rebbe didn't seem to hold that shita. So they asked the Sklen Rebbe, you also hold like that? So he said, sure, Avada, ich halt euch as Matonish gain to them Kaisel, as muss laufen to them Kaisel. You can't go to the Kaisel, you have to run to the Kaisel. Person has to run to the Helika Kaisel. Person that doesn't have that shita, so nobody has to run to the Kaisel. So let's run to the Kaisel today. We'll learn the halachas and give ourselves a chukah and cheshik to learn about the Kaisel. I always tell my wife, I try to go every Thursday night with my Rebbitzin, and whenever I go, I always tell her, you know how much money I just saved? I just saved $7,000. Same speech I give her every Thursday night. She says, why'd you save, same speech? So look, me, if I be in America, a balabas, there's no shaila kidding. I'm a walnut. You couldn't keep me away from the Kaisel. I would have to spend $7,000 to get a direct flight there and a direct flight back every Thursday night. And I'm not going to sit with the pashita, with the business class. So every Thursday night, I go there, and I daven for you guys. I daven for the Talmidim, especially the Kailul Aguda, Inzer Kailul. And so let's get a good feel for the Kaisel, how much our tzaddikim, how much the Gedolim, they long to go to the Kaisel. The Mungacha writes in one place that I'm not like my father. My father, he made a shavua that he'll never go to the Kaisel, because he said if he'll go to the Kaisel, he'll never be able to leave. And he knows that his Talmidim need him, his Chassidim need him. So he made a shvua never to go. He says, me, I'm not exactly like my father. I do go to the Kaisel. But when it was described with such beauty, how the Munkacher went to the Kaisel for the first time, he took off his shoes and he crawled and he cried. Yossi, Tamasi, how much Klal Yisrael, all the Deiris, how much they loved the Kaisel, how much that was the Makim where we felt the Shechina Leizazim Mishami Oilam. How the Maral Diskin would look at the wall at the Kaisel, at the Helika Kaisel, and he had to change his living quarters because he couldn't take the Agmas Nefesh of seeing that Tumah on top of the Kaisel, on top of the Makom HaMikdash. They say that the Chazon Ish, he went to the Kaisel, I think they say one time, maybe two times, I think one time. And when the Chazon Ish went to the Kaisel, he never went again. So they asked her, it was asked afterward, why did the Chazon Ish not go to the Kaisel? So he said the Chazon Ish was so misragish, he suffered a mild heart attack. And for him, it was Pekuach Nefesh to be by the Kaisel. And for us, Rabbi say that are not holding on that much rega, but we have to at least have appreciation for the Kaisel. The marshal person goes to the Kaisel. The one thing you have to know about the Kaisel, as in Matana Shvet, a person can't talk by the Kaisel. How do you know, Rabbi say, that in halacha the Kaisel has a din of a base knesses? The Maisa, there's a lot of halachas in a base knesses. How do you know that the Kaisel has a din of a base knesses? It's pashit. Everybody talks there. That's the raya. Chalila, the exact opposite. You have to go Rabbi side to the Kaisel. You don't talk by the Kaisel. Person has to have one place on planet Earth that he doesn't talk, and he just talks to one, the Helika Bashefer, who's Leizaza Shchina Me'oilam Hineu Oimed Achar Kaisleinu Mashkiach. How much HaRav is by the Kaisel. Geshu has Nayim like Kaisel. The Kaisel has ears. The Kaisel has trerin. The Kaisel has tears. Everyone knows the story with Zvil Rebbe when Rama was coming to Eretz Yisrael, and the Zvil went to they have an Edis. have a Kabbalah that there was mamish trera and tears that came out of the Halakha Kaisel. That's the Kaisel, and let's try to appreciate more by learning the halachas of the Kaisel. The Gemara in Moed Katan and Daf Chavav that the Olam saw brings down the Elu Kroyin Shein Misachin. There's situations le'aleinu Rachmana litzlan that a person has to be kareya and he can't sew it up. The Gemara says a father Rachmana litzlan, a mother Rachmana litzlan, a rebbe Rachmana litzlan, the nasi, the beis din Chalila, a birchat Hashem al Torah shenisrav Chalila, al Ari Yehuda al Mikdash ve'al Yerushalayim. And that state the Gemara that a person has to raise kriya when he sees the Ari Yehuda and when he sees the Makim Mikdash and when he sees Yerushalayim Yer Kodesh. The Gemara goes on and brings psukim to the extent the Gemara brings a pasuk by Ari Yehuda, Ar Kitchecha, Yu Midbar, and he has to. The Gemara brings a pasuk by Yerushalayim, Beis HaMikdash, Beis Kachenu v'Sifarseinu, Asher Hilalucha v'Seinu Ayilasrei v'Seish v'Chol Machmadenu Hayilachir v'Kareya. So this is the halacha that a person has to kareya on the Ari Yehuda, the Ari Yerushalayim, and on the Beis HaMikdash, the Makom HaMikdash. What grada are the Ari Yehuda? What are they? Mishabura is quick to point out from the Bach that we don't rois kriya on the Ari Yisrael because they don't have that same chshivas. What are the Ari Yehuda? Kipshutai, Shevet Levi brings down that the Ari Yehuda might be considered, the Shevet Levi in Chelik Zayin and Siman Ein Ches, an example for us of the Ari Yehuda might be Yerushalayim. What do you mean? How could you say that Yerushalayim is an Ar Yehuda? Yerushalayim is Yerushalayim. Yeah, but what about the Naya Shtetl? What about the new city of Yerushalayim? That clearly is not considered the Yerushalayim of old. That's certainly not considered the Yerushalayim that the Chazal were talking about. So maybe that's included in Ar Yehuda. And the Shevet Levi said that perhaps that requires a Kriya. A person might have to write Kriya on the new Yerushalayim, on what we call Yerushalayim, where I'm living right now. It's Ar Yehuda. Excuse me. The other Ar Yehuda are considered Beersheva, Chevron, the Chedayma. No, the Maisa. Shulchan Aruch basis, you karei on the Mikdash at Tefach, and then afterward, when you see Yerushalayim, you moisif on the Kara Kolshu. We'll see in a moment that the Stipler really said already that the meaning of many people is when they come to Yerushalayim the first time, they put their head down and they try not to focus on Yerushalayim. Well, it's not going to work if you're driving, but they put their head down, and when they get to Kaisel, they'll raise Kriya on the Kaisel and on the Ir Yerushalayim, the Ar Yehuda, all at once. Now, the big Shaila, Mishabur discusses, excuse me, Mishabur discusses the big Shaila you've gotten days, is that it says that when do you raise Kriya is Bechorbanon, when Yerushalayim is in the Matzav of Chorban. Afilo says the Mishabura, even if there's Jews there, Afilo Yoshvin Yisraelim, but given that the Yishmaelim, the Arabs, Yimach Shemam, are Moishel, that's called Bechorbanon. The obvious catch is, what's the din of today? Excuse me. What's the din of today? Do we say that today, the Maisa, it's occupied by Jewish people and it's also run by Jewish people? So what do we say? Do we say that today? Let's say we'll go first talking about the Ari Yehuda. Do we say that on the Ari Yehuda you have to raise Kriya? Because Nachalz, Mashiach hasn't come yet. So we still obviously are lacking. And the Igros Moshe says an incredible chiddush in Chelik Dalet and Siman Ayin Oisid Aleph. He brings down. It also in Chelik Hey in Siman Lamed Zayin, where Moshe discusses this in Ois Aleph. He brings down the Lamaisa, the Iker Kpeda, it sounds like from the Poiskim, are Kavan She'umas Moishlam Aleim, since the Umas are Moishal on them. Therefore, it's called Chorban. And that's the Lashon of the Mishnah Berurah. That I comment that the Umas are Moishal, then that has a din of Chorban. Excuse me. Says the Mishnah Berurah, says the Ramosha, in Cain today, Ein Moishlam Oimas Al Ara Yehuda Vad Yerushalayim. Today, the Goyim aren't the ones that are Shoilet. Ve'hem Yushavim, who time Gadol not to be Kareya. And Ramosha comes out, Psak Halacha, Maradik Chiddush, that today on the Ari Yehuda, you don't have to raise Kriya because Saif, we control them, and Saif, we live in them. So therefore, Agam that the Mashiach is not here yet, and Agam that the Geula is certainly not here yet. But that's not the Keveya of seeing the Makim in a Makim of Charav. And this Bemis is the Psak of the Goyim of Moshe. The truth is, that Psak on Ari Yehuda, most people follow anyways because it's not exactly clear where the Ari Yehuda are. The big question is what about on Yerushalayim? And I guess we'll talk about the Ir Atikah, the Yerais Kriya, upon seeing the Ir Atikah. Now, Ramosha says it's Chiddush even on the Yerushalayim. He says, he says, those people mistaber, that even though there's no geula b'avodas or rabbim, but ain't the kroya b'riyas Yerushalayim. Because Chazdei Hashem Yisparach, Yerushalayim is very, very built up. And Yerushalayim is extremely built up. And the Maisa, I'll be Moisa for Baisa. Moshe didn't know this, but to buy a dira in Iratika today, fragnish. So it's very built up. Libenuya, the Teferes. And it's not in the Rishuts of the Umas HaOlam. So Tzarech Levarech, Rak Bir Oisei Makam HaMikdash. Moshe says you only have to make the bracha, you only have to grace kriya upon seeing the makam of the mikdash. This is the chiddush of the Goyim of Moshe. He holds you don't rice on any place chutz from the base of mikdash. Vashtetzach, the base of mikdash, you have to rice on the kaisel. You have to rice on because that itself is the greatest churban that there is, and that doesn't matter if we do control. And everybody knows today that we certainly don't control. But that's the chiddush of Moshe, that you don't rice. I must tell you, somewhat this is really the meaning of oilam. Now it happens to be. Many Gedolim argued on Rav Moshe in the Orchas Rabbeinu and Chelik Aleph on page 318. He brings the Murdik Lashon from Rav David Jungreis. From Rav David Jungreis, he said, "Hamerikayim sholtim." He says, "What? We run the Kaisel, we run the Yerushalayim, we run the Ari Yehuda. The Americans are shoylet. Alpiyam Yishak Akal. It's up to them. If we have to be good over here and we have to behave. It's just that they let us run the city-state. It's an American city-state, Rabbi Isai. And the Maisa, the Rav Shlomo Zalman argues, he says, in the Ira Kodesh, in the Mikdash, you have Knasiyas Shel Nachrim. How could you say that in Yerushalayim, there's churches, and Rabbi Isai is a lot worse than churches today in Yerushalayim, Ira Kodesh, and in the Ari Yehuda. So how could you say that's the greatest korban that there is? So therefore, Pashtis, this is the liker of Moshe. Most of the Gedolim didn't go with Rav Moshe. Satmar Rebbe, Kedua certainly didn't go with Rav Moshe. Satmar Rebbe in Chelik, in Siman Lamed Oisvav, he says, it's much worse what we have today. It's Harbe Yosei Garua. To have it built up and not run Al Pi Torah is much, much worse. Rav Moshe obviously is learning that that's not totally in Chil Shabbos and it's not totally in Pritzis. It's totally in, is it a Makim Charav? Is it when you see it, do you right away see the Chorban? And I guess the Satmar Rebbe in that sheet is saying, what do you mean when you see it? You see Chorban. So that's already a Machlekes. Most people, like I said, they're not going to raise Kriya anyways until they come to the actual Kaisel. I guess to get out of the Shiloh, you keep your head down if you're in the cab until you get to that place, which we'll talk about in a moment. Now, the Makim Mikdash itself, that mistapik adamei oilam, nobody ever was mistapik and should be mistapik about such a thing. And that Rav Moshe writes in Chelik Daled Siman Ayin Oisid Aleph, Kisharoyim Mokim HaMikdash, that Verstetzach, it's not Shaykh, the only like Shaykh Sheyivne, the only way to build such a thing is Al Yidei Melech Mashiach. So Sarach Likroya B'Pshitis, of course you have to. And when Mashiach will come, b'meir b'yameinu, afim neimer yeksazman at even though it's going to take time, no, Mashiach will tell us what to do. Yereinu Melech Mashiach said, we'll know then if we should yes raise kriya or not raise kriya when Mashiach comes. And this, of course, is the prevalent hanhaga. That's avada the psak halacha. That's the psak halacha. Now, the etzem hakaisel. Before we go into the kriya, what are we talking about when we discuss the wall of the kaisel? It's not important to know. There's really three ksalim, Rabbi Isai. There's the Heichel, there's the actual Heichel, there's the which is of course the Arin, the Mizbeach was there, the Kodesh HaKadoshim and whatnot. Excuse me. Excuse me, Rabbi Isai. There's the Kaisel, there's the Heichel, there's the Azara. Sorry about that. There's the Azara, that includes the Ezra's Nashim, the Ezra's Yisrael, the Ezra's Kehanim, the Mizbeach HaChitzim. And there's the HaRav. So when we discuss the Kaisel, what exactly are we discussing? What is on the other side of the Kaisel? Is it the HaRav? Are we further in? Are we already by the Azara? What's the nafkamina? The nafkamina is tremendous, Rabbi Isai. If we're on the Kaisel of the Azara, of the, we'll call the Ezra's Nashim and the Ezra's Yisrael, so then Rabbi Isai, a person's not allowed to be there when he's Tamei Meis. And if we're on the outside of the HaRav, so So then for sure you're allowed to be there Tamei Meis. Even in the HaRav, there are parts that a person's allowed to be when he's Tamei Meis. So what do you say? What's an nafkamina? Is a person allowed to go to the kaisel? It sounds like an interesting question, but is a person allowed to go to the kaisel? So the Maisa, this was a shocking chiddush of the Radbaz in Tafrei Study Aleph. That even more shocking, the Chachmas Adam, he wrote a sefer. The Chachmas Adam wrote a sefer called Shar Mishpatei Haaretz. Over there, he wrote a sefer because he said, how could a person come to work in the palace and not know the rules and the etiquette and the all the different feinkeit that he needs to know to work in the palace? And we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu every day, it's Semach David Avdecha, and we ask for Uvnei Yerushalayim, so you have to know the halachas of Eretz Yisrael. So in Chachmas Adam, Shar Mishpatei Haaretz, Perkei Al Siv Ches, he says, Sarach Lizar Me'oid, not to go to the Makom HaMikdash, because we're Tamei Meisim. And he says, if you go to the Makom Mikdash, you chayiv kares, and that's pashit, that a person that goes up to HaRav today, pashit that he's chayiv kares. Now, filu, the man domer, the kedushas of Aretz is batal, but the kedushas of Mikdash is never batal. And that's pashit, the Mishabura's psak, even though you find weird things today, people think they can chatch the chalila 1,000 times to go to HaRav, but the psak of all the gedolim, all the poskim always was and always will be that the makim is the kedushas lay batal. So about a person that goes up to HaRav today because he's a Tamei Meis and he's going into the place of the Azara, Avada is kares. But then the Chachmas Adam says an incredible chiddush. He says, "Kishahoylech l'makom hamikdash sarch yeloi har abayis b'mizrach v'uyamoid b'mayrav ponim l'mizrach daim l'mikdash ki hakoisel ha'maravi ha'nisher rotzel loymar koisel ha'azara." Says the Chachmas Adam, the koisel maravi, what we call the koisel maravi, is the koisel ha'azara, which is shahaisel achroi kodesh ha'kedashim. V'chein muter leilach samach la aval mimizrach ha'abayis l'mayrav aser. Now, this is an incredible chiddush. If you're listening well, what the Chachmas Adam just said is that a person is not allowed to go to the kaisel because he's touching the Azara, which means if he has a Tumah Yotzei Migufay, okay, it could be Tumah Meis, he's allowed to be standing there. But if he's a Tumah Yotzei Migufay, he's not allowed to be inside the HaRav. And the person has carry, a person's a nida, a person has all types of Tumah Yotzei Migufay. This is the psak of the Chachmas Adam, and this is the reason why you heard, when you guys were Bachrim, you heard that there was people that they were actually machmir not to go to the kaisel. Some people still remember the brisker Rav, that he would go to where the buses are and he wouldn't get closer than that. He says, who knows? Maybe the area in front of me is HaRav. And he was chayshish for Tumas HaYaitzis Megufayis, v'chulei. Even if you wouldn't be chayshish, even if they're in that place, you're allowed to go there with Tumas Meis. But he was afraid that that makom itself is considered HaRav, and there's Tumas HaYaitzis Megufay. Digger Smoishin Chelik Beisim and Kufyat Gimel. He says that they bring down in the Shelas David, Rav David Karlin was mistapik but Kaisel Ezi. He was mistapik which one it is. He says maybe that's pshat in the brisker Rav that they say he didn't go to the Kaisel because he was chayshish for Tumas and Tumas Hayetzis Megufay. Avalani Tumas says going Rav Moshe Makim Shemispalim Sham Uvadai Kabbalah Midoiris Rabbeinu Arishonim. Murdik Amuna or Moshe has. He says that mamish must be a Kabbalah. If you see Yidden davening there, it must be going all the way back. And I must tell you, on the Etzim Zach that Rav Moshe says, there's a chiddush. Because the Ramban, when he traveled to Eretz Yisrael, probably around 1270, when he got kicked out because he won the debate. So when the Ramban traveled to Eretz Yisrael and he wrote his memoirs, he doesn't talk about going to the Kaisel because Rabbi said the Kaisel was hidden. And some of us know the story. I think the Bekitzer version of the story is that the Kaisel was hidden for many years. And the truth is that the Kaisel sank into the ground. And to today, you can go to the Kaisel and you can see a glass floor, and you can see all the way down to the ground because it was Tavu Sharel. Kosh Baruch Hu made a nace that the Kaisel, the Beis HaMikdash Pashit, went into the ground. It's no longer HaRav. It's all the way into the ground. And the Goyim wanted to be Mavaza, HaRav, so they used to use HaRav, the Kaisel, as a garbage dump. And the story goes that I think it was the Sultan Suleiman, I think it was, that one day he sees an old Arab lady and she's carrying 2 garbage bags. I don't know what kind of garbage bags, but she was carrying a garbage, and he said, where are you going? And he said, no, leave me alone. I have to go. I've come from a long journey. And she was going to dump her garbage over there in the big garbage dump, and it's a very important experience. So what did he do? Sultan Suleiman wanted to know what's going on under there. So he sprinkled a couple of shekels on top of the garbage dump, and he sent a couple of Arabs. They said, oh, there's money over here. No. So they took those money and they started digging. Maybe there's more. Okay, then he got rid of those guys and fragnished. I in the Gemara Avodah Zarah Daf Yud. Then he got rid of those guys, and then he sprinkled some more coins. You know, where I come from, everybody said, they say it's cheaper to buy 2 Arabs to hold up your pants than to buy a belt. So he got a couple more until they got to the bottom of this, and they uncovered the kaisel. So that which Rav Moshe says over here, that the kaisel was around in the time of the Rishonim, that's not so pashut, the actual makkah. But I guess what Rav Moshe means to say is that, you know, if Taka, all of Klal Yisrael davens by that makim, as layunat tzaddik, it can't be that a Kadosh Baruch Hu would bring a michshel to the gans Klal Yisrael, that everybody considers this to be the actual kaisel of the HaRav. And since it's a kaisel of the HaRav, you can go there tamei meis and tamei yotzei migufay. Now there are people that, and this is the psak, this is of course the minig, there's no question. If you look in the Sefer Ira Kodesh V'Mikdash, in Chelik Daled Perik Beis, he has 8 rayas that the kaisel is the kaisel of the HaRav and not the kaisel of the Azara. Versteht sich? That has nothing to do with what we said before. Versteht sich? A person cannot go on the other side of that kaisel, because then he's number one, he might have a tamei yotzei migufay, and he might be even he's in HaRav for sure. And number two, he might be walking in places which are actually the Azara, when there it's asked to go, even if he's a tamei meis. So that's why Chalila, a person shouldn't be going there. That goes without saying.
Do we have exact map, more or less, or is there a consensus? Since none of us have ever been up there, I only see photographs. There's a consensus of where the delineation is up there between the Azara and the HaRav, between HaRav and the Azara, and therefore would there be some makom for those who are going up to say they're only in the HaRav?
Rav Moshe writes in a tshuva that we don't have a Kabbalah which parts are that chelik of HaRav and which parts that are a chelik of the Azara. I'm actually going to mention something now about that. The Red Baraz in that tshuva in Tavrit Sadi Aleph, he says Hadavar Barer Shetachas HaKippa. He says he has a Kabbalah that under the kippa meaning that mask, that tuma, under the mask is where the Evan Shasi is. He writes Beli Safek, and that's called Al-Aqsara. That's that toma, that's that mask. And for this reason, there are those that say that a person, when he davens at the kaisel, we know that the Shulchan Aruch and Simon Tzadi Dalet says that when a person davens, you guys, when you daven, you have to daven derech Eretz Yisrael. Well, I'm already here. Then you have to daven derech Yerushalayim, and then derech the Makom HaMikdash, the kaisel, derech Kodesh HaKadoshim Shara Shemayim. That's how you have to daven every day. So Rav Moshe Sternbach brings down that this is why a person should, even when he's at the kaisel, he should face toward, we'll call it the north. In other words, toward, I'm on the west now, the western wall. He should face toward the north, toward the mosque. Others are not so happy about turning toward the mosque and davening toward the mosque. Moshe Sternbach himself says, we don't have a very clear Kabbalah like the Rebbe says, if it's exactly right there, the Kodesh HaKadoshim. He says it might be more where the trees are. That's between where the kaisel is and between the mosque. And the truth is, we really don't have much of a Kabbalah. The Tzitzel Yezer and Chelik Yud and Siman Aleph and Oit Samech. He says even on the southern excavations, all that stuff going there, we have no Kabbalah of going anywhere basically past the line. We don't go anywhere. Even in the south, he brings a whole story over there that Shmuel Salant wouldn't even send a goyish shomer there when his goat ran away to the other side in the southern excavation. So that's why the Maisa, you stay away from the other side or by side, but stay on this side, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu's on the other side and he's listening to your tefillas on this side. The Gabe touching the kaisel, kafi what you heard today, Pashtus, it would be mutter. What would be the tzad not to touch the kaisel? The word tzadikim that had on haga. Some say different things. Maybe the wall moved, different things. Some say that maybe the wall itself is niskadish with the HaRav itself. These are chedushim. The pashtus is you're allowed to touch the kaisel, and the Chazain Ish, the Maisa, did touch the kaisel. Amar Marna Chazain Ish, he told the Reb Chaim, she yochel geshet at a kaisel, you're allowed to touch the kaisel. The Steipler was seen kissing the kaisel. All the years I used to go Rav Scheinberg Zichron Levracha to the kaisel. I saw Rav Scheinberg kissing the kaisel and touching the kaisel, and certainly that's the Ikra Din. There is a chumrah not to, but that's the Ikra Din. Maybe the chumrah is the yes to. The Maisa Gabi putting your fingers in the wall, in the holes there, that's a Shiloh Bia B'mixas, is that Shmei Bia. But the Avnei Nezer in a beautiful tshuva in Yardei Siman Taf Nun explains that it's not a Bia B'mixas since it can't get all the way through. There are people Because of this, they won't put a kvittel into the wall with their fingers. They'll push it in with a pen. The truth is, listen, the kvittel is very chashiv. The tefillah is chashiv. Everything is there is chashiv. Rabbi say, whoever doesn't touch the wall, kaddish yomer. Whoever wants to kiss the wall, kaddish yomer. Das is lemaisa. But one thing is bar, Rabbi say, not to talk shtusim by the kaisel, not to talk anything by the kaisel, except for tefillah and maisim toivim. The Chazon Avadia, he writes a beautiful words in Arba Taniyas in the page 445. Hamekel roish besicha betela, or eating and drinking by the kaisel and smoking. Avayna gadol min asai. When Moshe Sternbuch says it's asim in a din, that area which is considered the muck in tefillah, I guess we'll call it the plaza. The hotel, Rabbi say. That area over there where people daven, that is the din of a shul. It's also the shmooze there. And there's no tanai on the kaisel, Rabbi say. So it's also the shmooze there. The einzige Zach, was we can learn in Dalton, is can learn in Dalton, we can daven in Dalton. Aber not. Shaila the Olam should think about: are you allowed to lean against the kaisel? Now we've seen many people all the years leaning on the kaisel, crying and leaning on the kaisel. Are you allowed to lean on the kaisel? Excuse me. You're allowed to lean on the kaisel. What's the shaila? The shaila is that you're getting a no from the wall. The wall itself is hektish. Ishladim is it's something to think about. The gabe the kriya. So the Gemara brings in Ma'ikatin Chavav, Amar Avchelbai, Amar Ula, Amar Birya, Amar Lazar, Haroya Ari Yuda b'Chorbanim. He says this thing, and he's kareya. He says the sprach, Ari kachecha yumidber, and by us he says, Oimer beis kachenu v'sefartenu asher helelucha v'seinu was a sreifas eish, kol machmadenu ayal cherba. The kareya, and he's kareya on the mikdash, and he's ma'aseh v'nushalayim. Now, the ma'aseh should know there are some people that they don't write kriya, and we'll see exactly if that is justified, but it's Dina de Gemara and it's Dina de Shulchan Aruch that a person that goes and he sees the kaisel, he sees the Makkah Mikdash, he has to raise kriya, and it's Yadua that the Rav Elyashiv would have told people, if you're not going to raise kriya, better not to go. Even though the kaisel is the holiest place on earth, and even though all of that unbelievable, incredible koyach of the kaisel, but if you're not going to raise kriya, so then the ends don't justify the means. You have to do what the halacha says, and not doing what the halacha says is worse. How do you do the kriya? The Mishnah Berurah in Sivkat in Vav discusses it. Excuse me. Mishnah Berurah in Sivkat in Vav discusses it. Pashtis, the derech of the kriya, the Rambam's shita, is this is the most chamerdika kriya, and it's like a kriya loyaleinu, a parent. A parent is standing with your hand, and you have to rise all the begadim until you're lave, and you have to go all the way down, not just the tefach, all the way down the liboy on the left side over the heart. Now the Ravid and the Mishnah Berurah seems to be soisim like that. The Ravid, and some say the minig is not like this. The Ravid learns it's not as chamer. I tell you what I see today. The minig is that you roast your outermost beged on the left side all the way down, which means practically, if a person comes to the kaisel and doesn't want to rip his jacket, so I heard from Rav Elyashiv, he could take off his jacket and he'll rip his shirt on the left side all the way down. Now he was yotzei the mitzvah's kriya, and now afterward he could put back on his jacket. He need not roast he has to roast the outermost beged at the point of when he's seeing that makom. So for example, if you go through put your head down when you come off the bus, or if you come out of your car, put your head down, you go through the metal detectors, and after you get through, you keep your head down, you go over there, you see the makom, you feel the pain, you say Baruch Dayan Ha'emes, like Rav Moshe says, then you take, your jacket should be off at this point, otherwise you'd have to raise your jacket because that's the outermost beged. Then you take your shirt on the left side, you raise it all the way down. You could take a little knife or don't take a knife, you get arrested over there, but you could take your key to make the hole, and then you rip all the way down, and you say the words that it says. The Mishnah Berurah brings the whole nusach. I can't read the whole nusach now, but certainly you say a base kachenu sifartenu asher lelucha v'seinu hayil l'sreifas eish. And the Mishnah Berurah brings more things that a person says. Brings kapitlach that a person should say in that matziv. He does not have to write anything else. That became the minig, and that's the chayra, what you should do. Lugabe being mafker a beged. Some people have an idea. They'll be mafker the begeds. I saw a beautiful tshuva in the Even Yisrael and Chelik Ches and Siman Mem Gimel. He brings down many reasons why it wouldn't work to do a hefker. He says, first of all, who says you want mechuyev to rice a baggage shel hefker? Second of all, who says you're not mechuyev to go and reacquire it that second? Because you have a chiyuv mitzvah to be karei on the Makam HaMikdash. Third of all, there's an anan sadi that you're not really being mafker b'leiv shalom. So therefore, being mafker your beged is not going to work. The other eitzah that some people do is they're makner their beged to somebody else. He's with somebody and he says, I'm not going to rice kriya, so I'll sell you my beged. So you should know that this is something which is extremely frowned upon in the Paiskim. And most Paiskim, the tain is that really, is it the other guys? Really? He could be makdish it now? Really? And there's not an anan sadi that he really wouldn't mind if you actually rip this beged. He owns this shirt, right? So borrowing a beged, which I'm being asked over here now, that pashtus is more kuladik. Because if I borrow your shirt and you don't give me a rishus to rip your shirt, I can't rip your shirt. So that is more kuladik. But I tell you, Abaisai, first and foremost, people ask me questions sometimes. Maybe I'll just go the first time on Shabbos because then I'll be putter from ripping, right? I don't know, Abaisai, you get off a plane, you run muzloif into them kaisel. You run to the kaisel. And what shirt do you rip, Abaisai? You can rip your best shirt also. And if you don't want to rip your best shirt, you're chayshish for baltashchas, you're not over on baltashchas. And you know what? Maybe don't rip just the shirt, rip the hearts, and don't worry about the shirt. So a person has an old shirt, take the shirt, feel the pain, feel the agmas nefesh, havadi rate. And the emes is, you're allowed to keep that shirt, and you're allowed to rice again. You're allowed to rice kriya again. It comes back 30 days later, a year later, you take that shirt with you. It has a hole over here now. So you move over a couple at spice, 3 at spice, and you can rip. And once you finish on that side, you can rip on the other side, and you keep on ripping. So that shirt will remind you always, you keep that shirt, it reminds you always that there's no base of mikdash, and there's a lot worse problems than not having a shirt. Now, Lamaisa, children, there's no chinuch. The Paiskim say there's no chinuch. The Mishabura brings down on rice and kriya. I guess the idea is very simple. We hope and pray that he won't need to know this in the future, because by then Mashiach will be here. A person that's seimich on his shulchan aviv, a bacher, etc. But there, the parents give reshus to their kids to do everything with their clothing and to buy the clothing. So then I don't think that's a good chinuch to tell the kid, no, but you can't rice for the kaisel. So he has an older shirt. He rices an old shirt, like we said. Women have a chiyuv to be kareh for shteitzach. They have to do it in betzenua dikaifin, and they have to make sure they're wearing something underneath. The truth is, Rabbi say, once you rice kriya, you're allowed to take off that beged. The person could go to the bathroom and over there, he can take off that beged and he can put on a different shirt if he doesn't want to walk around with a ripped shirt. Asuma, Gimel Simipehei says he does not have to rice kriya. A person that's blind does not rice kriya. A chassan and kala during Sheva Brachas, should they rice kriya? It's very interesting. I saw brought down from Rechaim Kanievsky that he said yes. I must tell you, I don't understand it. And Banya, I don't understand it. It's very difficult because Pashtis, it has a din of a regel. And the din of a regel is there's no availus in a regel. So if there's no availus, then Pashtis, they would not have the chiyuv to rice kriya. And I think that is the minig. The minig of the chasanim and the Kallus is that they don't rice at the kaisel. Now, what exactly do you have to see in order to rice? Where's the chiyuv to rice? So the Bach says, very simply, when you see that tumah, when a person sees that mask and that tumah on the Makam HaKodesh, avada rip on that. That's the biggest reason to rip kriya. It was Yadua in Yerushalayim, Rav Elyashiv would make sure every 30 days to either go to the kaisel or at least to see that tumah. He would go to Rechav Nevi'im over there, I remember. And he would stand there for a second on Rechav Nevi'im, and you'd be able to see the mask so that he wouldn't go 30 days without having seen it. And therefore he battered himself from having to raise kriya. Seeing the kaisel itself, the Bach says mefurish, that of course is also a reason for a person to rice kriya. When does a person rice? There's lots of times flying around. So Shabbos, avada, you don't rice kriya. Yontif, avada not. Chol Hamoed, also there's no din kriya the Pais can say on Chol Hamoed, because even though that's a shtickle chiddush, because lo yaleinu rachmana litzlan, there is a veilus, a person does rice kriya lo yaleinu on a parent lo yaleinu. But there's no din kriya by the kaisel. Now, Erev Shabbos after Chatzais, anybody knows from the old Yerushalayim folklore knows that there is a a zog in Yerushalayim that Erev Shabbos after Chatzos and Motzei Shabbos bis Chatzos, you don't roast kriya by the kaisel. It happens to be that this is a minig. Rav Moshe himself in Yeridei Chelik Gimel Siman Nun Beis Eis Daled, he says, listen, I don't know from this minig on Motzei Shabbos. I don't know from this minig. He says, but what should I tell you? Im yesh minig kavua barur, so then you're allowed to do it, even though I don't know the reason. It happens to be that the minig in Yerushalayim is, they say it over, is that on Erev Shabbos, if you go to the kaisel with your Shabbos clothing, or Motzei Shabbos, you go to the kaisel with your Shabbos clothing, you don't roast kriya. That has become the minig. The Maisa that has become the minig. But Chalila, for a person to get off the airplane and say, you know what, I'll wait till Erev Shabbos after Chatzos so that I don't have to roast kriya. When you get there, Eretz Yisrael, right, you move life into them kaisel. You run to the kaisel. Run to the kaisel. Purim, interesting, is a machlekes if there's a chi of kriya. It sounds like on Rosh Chodesh there is a chi of kriya. It sounds like on Chanukah there is a chi of kriya, and it sounds like on Isru Chag there is a chi of kriya from the Paiskim. Shlomo Zalman has an interesting tshuva in the Alichas Shleima. He talks about on Tisha B'Av. He said there is some minig that goes around that people say on a day that you don't say Tachanun, you don't roast kriya. There is such a zach. It's not the pashtus of the halacha, but Rosh Hashanah says some people say that. He says, but Tisha B'Av for sure not. Tisha B'Av, Tisha B'Av, we don't say Tachanun, but Avad does rice kriya. I'm being asked about bris. You should know that your question, Rechaim Kanievsky, he has a tshuva in the 376th tshuva. They asked Rechaim Kanievsky, and he said he is chayiv to, but they have to know that that is not the pashtus haminig. The minig is that the Bali bris, they go to the kaisel, many of them, and they don't roast kriya. Now, what happens? A person went to the kaisel and he was potter from ricing. For example, he went on Shabbos. Does he now have to rice on Motzei Shabbos? So that the Igros Moshe in Chelekei in Siman Lamed Zayin Ois Daled, he tells us that if you went there, you weren't chayiv in kriya. So now it was you went there at a time that you were pottered from the kriya, and you need not rice kriya afterward. I was just asked Agov if Erev Yom Kippur after Chatzos, in that same place, Rav Chaim Kanievsky says Erev Yom Kippur after Chatzos, then you do not have to rice kriya. It's interesting. I'm not sure why dafka after Chatzos. It's interesting. However, Rabbi say, what happens if a person went to the kaisel, the Isser, and did not rip kriya, and then afterward he was told by his friend, hey, you went to the kaisel, but you haven't been to the kaisel in 30 days. So how is it that you didn't rip kriya, rice kriya? So Rav Moshe says in Chelik Gimel Seif Siman Nun Beis, in Rav Shabbos, like I just mentioned, Linias Daiti, he has it sad, Rav Moshe. I'm sorry if I say, I think I made a mistake here. No, again. If you went to the kaisel on Shabbos, the heter, Rav Moshe says that you do not need to rice now on Motzei Shabbos. However, Rav Moshe says like this. He says, no, I take it back. I made a mistake. Rav Moshe is saying, what happens if a person went to the kaisel on Shabbos? No, Rav Moshe says, Rav Moshe says, what happens if a person went to the kaisel on Shabbos, and now he came back, went to Shabbos. So on Shabbos, obviously, he didn't write kriya because he was pater in Shabbos. He can't rip kriya. Do you say that beged had a chiyuv of kriya, and on Motzei Shabbos, you have to rip that beged? That Rav Moshe says no. But then Rav Moshe says an unbelievable chiddush. Rav Moshe says, but now, if you go back to the kaisel tomorrow or the next day or some other time within 30 days, says Rav Moshe, now you're chayiv to rice kriya. Now that, you should know that the minig is not like that. Shlomo Zalman brings down, Rav Elyashiv brings down that the minig is not like that. Rav Moshe Sternberg has a beautiful tshuva in Chelik Aleph and Siman Shin Lamed Daled about it. And the minig is not like Rav Moshe. You get the feeling from Rav Moshe and his tshuva is that Adkama there are minhagim kavuim on how to act by the kaisel, Gabe kriya, that he is mevatel his das. Ayin sham, This one I'm not sure what to do about, because Rav Moshe on this one says that it's a toyus. He says, who toyus ve'eno minig afim emes shenagu kain. So here you can't say that. Here you can't say, so Rav Moshe, is a big fight here between Rav Moshe and Shlomo Zalman. What happens if you go to the Kaisel on Shabbos for the first time? Now you go back next Wednesday, in the middle of the week. Rav Moshe tells you have to raise kriya on the shirt now. And Shlomo Zalman said it's not like that, and the minig is not like that. I guess it's a shiloh for your local Orthodox rabbi. If you ask an Orthodox rabbi in Eretz Yisrael, you're going to get one answer. If you ask a rabbi in America, you're going to get a different answer. L'gabe, the Bnei Yerushalayim, the people that live in Yerushalayim, Yer Kodesh, there is a chidah that brings down that there's a, I remember I met once a person who came to the Kaisel from America, and I was surprised he didn't write kriya. So I said to him, what's the pshat you don't write kriya? It's, you haven't been here. And so he says to me, I'm a Yerushalmi. I'm a Yerushalmi. Yerushalmis don't write kriya. So let me clarify for a moment. There's no such thing that if you eat Yerushalmi kugel, you don't raise kriya. There's no, we're all Yerushalayimers, Rabbi Isai. There's all, we're here in Yerushalayim. So that's not what it was. The Chidah said that if you live in Yerushalayim, the Chidah brings down the Birkei Yosef, Hadar Yerushalayim, and 30 days have gone by that you didn't see the base of Mikdash, Yechayev Likraya, and that's what the Rebaz says. He ends off, V'loi Nagu came. It's not the minik. And the Rebaz himself says it's not the minik. All the diarists, people tried to figure out why taka it's not the minig. Why is it that people that live in Yerushalayim and have not been there for 30 days, so why is it that the minig is that there are a lot of people that just don't raise kriya? What's the pshat in this minig? So, the Maisa, before I begin, you should know if the Yashiv held, if you live in Yerushalayim, you do have to raise kriya. If you aren't there for 30 days, you have to raise kriya. That was the Psaka Rav Yashiv. Rav Moshe, Igros Moshe, Archaim, Chelekei, Simin Lamed Zayin, Reis Gimel. He says, Masha Shemata from Talmud Chacham Gadol in Yerushalayim, that they're not noyik to be Korea. And he gave a reason, because we don't have a Sechadas, because we're so near the Kaisel, so we see it. He says, Lanias Daiti is a klum. And even though years ago he did rice, we don't find such a thing. Pshutai, it's totally the Indian Metzias. Was he there for 30 days or not? And Mefurish and the Rebaz, so Rav Moshe, Rav Yashiv, they all hold that you do have to rice if you live in Yerushalayim and you haven't been there for 30 days. Now I must tell you that there really is such a minig. There really is such a minig. They asked Shlomo Zalman what's pshat in the minig. So Shlomo Zalman said it's very pashut. He said if you could be living in Yerushalayim for 30 days and not, go to the Kaisel, it obviously shows that you don't care. If you have an Alta Baba, that lives in the town and you don't visit her once in 30 days, it obviously shows that you don't care. So if you don't care, so what's the point in ripping? Just abit to rip the clothing. The tachlis is not to rip the shirt. The tachlis is to roast the hearts. Simin shechaser loy regishis la Kaisel v'tzar imkein amalik kraya. And they say maybe agufa, maybe you should rip kriya on that. So this is definitely a minig in Yerushalayim. Maisa, is it baltashchis to rip if you want to not have that minig? What the poskim say to do is to try to get out of the shaila and to try to make sure you go and visit the Alta Baba, to visit the Shechina once in 30 days if you're living in Yerushalayim. If you're not able to, so then the Maisa, maybe you can go to Rechov Nevi'im and you have to see that Tumah. And if you see that Tumah, you know that the Churban is still there. And that itself patters you because you already experienced and feel the Churban within 30 days. Within 30 days. Now, a few halachas about the Kaisel, unrelated to the actual Kaisel, as far as the Kedusha of the Makim and the Kaisel. So everyone knows the famous Shaila about the cameras at the Kaisel, the places in Gansen totally being recorded and videoed 24/7. So you should know that it's Yadua that Rav Yashiv had chumras about going to the Kaisel for this reason on Shabbos. Maisa, we spoke in a previous year that there is makim to be makel based on the Shevet Levi that we spoke about. It's a psikresha, the echbaslei, and So that's not so pashut. Is it really like echbaslei? I very much want that the kaisel should be, recorded and videoed, because I don't want to be near some bad guy by the kaisel. I like him to be picked up. But I guess it's still somewhat of a misasek. I guess it's also important to know, Rabbi Say, those that don't know about the shaila, there's definitely no mitzvah to tell them. Because if akama there misasek, it's much better for them. But the minhag is to go, and it is based on these svaras. It is maybe somewhat of secret the leach baslei, and it is a misasek, and therefore the minhag is has to go even on Shabbos. The gabe going to the kaisel 40 days b'ritzifus. Everyone knows there's a skula going to the kaisel 40 days. You go to the kaisel, you go to kaisel just for that purpose, and you ask for that specific bakasha 40 days. So it's interesting. In Ramesh Sternbach has a tshuva in Chelekei Kuf Samach Daled. He says you should know Kabbalah biyadenu, the misha tzarich Yeshua. If you need a Yeshua, v'ugar rochak me'akaisel, and you live far from the kaisel, you can't go 40 days. Yelech arbayim yoyim ritzufim lebeis hakneses ach v'rak lematarazu. Go to the shul every single day for 40 days, just for this purpose, and ask for that bakasha. It's maybe something to tell people that are looking for Yeshua. He doesn't have to go all the way to the kaisel. He can go to the base knesses also if he's unable to go to the kaisel. The Maisa, could you take a picture by the kaisel? What's the question? You're using the kaisel as a backdrop. So isn't that getting hana from hektish? The kaisel itself is hektish. Ramosha is a phenomenal tshuva. In Yeridei Chelik Dalet Siman Samech Gimel, where somebody took a piece of the kaisel and he asked Ramosha what to do. Ramosha yells at him and screams at him, "How could you do that? How can you take a piece from the kaisel? It's hektish and everything." And what would happen if everyone would take a piece? But let's done. Am I allowed to take a picture by the kaisel? Hooray! If I'm taking a picture by the kaisel, the backdrop, just like this svarim behind me is a very nice background for a shear. So then the kaisel is a background. So you're getting a na from the kaisel. So do we say that you're getting a na? But you'll say, wait. I know Gemara Pesachim that kol v'reach v'mara ain't by mishum meila. Nachon, it's not meila, but the Ran, the Rishayim over there say yes, but it's still aser. You're still not allowed to get hana. And this is a shayla that our Rebbe, one of our great Rebbeim in the Aguda, Vitzak Zilberstein, in Aleinu Shabbat Cheli Beis, Tshuva Gimel, let's stalim al rekel kaisel, Maravi, aim is a davar yasher. Sarich Ian, is it mutter? And you know what else he declares? What about the backdrop of the Chanukah licht? Isn't it aneris alalu koydeshem ve'ein on the rishus l'shtamish behem? I guess that's leroysim bilvad. So it's an interesting shaila. Should know, you have to know. Some people have anhaga that they feel bichlal it's not a fine kite to use the kaisel as your backdrop. I guess each person has to know what his sensitivities are. So this Rabbi Say, we'll say in a nutshell. Let's make a little bit of a sikum. We saw a tremendous amount today. We saw that the kaisel, Rabbi Say, and moves life into them kaisel. If a person has an opportunity and a chance to go to the kaisel, if the Mungacha went on all four